I knew something was wrong the second my daughter flinched at the sound of my voice. Not a big flinch, just a tiny, frightened twitch, the kind people make when a truth they buried suddenly sits up. That's the moment my Christmas turned cold. I hadn't even taken off my coat yet. The house was warm, lights glowing, laughter bubbling from the dining room like a performance for an audience that didn't include me. But beneath all that cheer, I felt a tremor, a warning, a shift in the air the moment I stepped inside. This is where I should tell you my name, because if I'm going to strip my heart open like this, you deserve to know who's speaking. I'm Celeste Bennett, and what happened at that dinner didn't just hurt me, it rearranged me. Before I take you deeper into this night, do something for me, drop where you're watching from. Because stories like this, you don't listen to them alone. They demand a witness. I walked into that dining room, pretending not to notice that my daughter, Imani, refused to meet my eyes. She sat rigid at the far end of the table, shoulders tight, fingers locked around her napkin like she needed something to hold on to. Her husband, Jared, stayed glued to her side, whispering low, guiding her fork, glancing at her every few seconds as if checking whether she was about to break. Imani used to run into my arms every holiday. Now, she couldn't even look at me. My heart did a slow, heavy drop into my stomach. The table was full. Family, co-workers of his, even his mother's neighbor. People chatting, laughing, passing dishes. And though none of them knew the script, I could tell Jared did. He watched me with the kind of careful interest men reserve for problems they hope go away on their own. I took my seat, not the one they set for me. That one was too far, too cold, too intentional. I pulled up a chair closer to my daughter because distance was something I wasn't ready to surrender, not yet. But she shifted away just half an inch. That half inch felt like a mile. I tried to join the conversation, but every time I spoke, someone talked over me. When I reached for the cornbread, the basket shifted the opposite direction. When I laughed at a joke, 3 people went silent, like I had broken the rhythm they practiced without me. And still, not once did my daughter say, "Mama, you okay?" Not once did she say, "I'm glad you're here." Not once did she say anything at all. When dessert plates were set down, something in me clicked, not like anger, not like sadness, but like a door opening to a hallway where truth lived. I lifted my glass. Forks froze. Voices dipped. The room, for the first time all night, remembered I existed. My stare found my daughter. Her eyes snapped to her lap. "Imani," I said, my voice threading through the room like a slow blade, "I want to make a toast." She stiffened. Her breathing changed. Even Jared's hand paused midway across the table. That told me more than any words could have. "I want our next toast," I continued, "to be at your wedding." It was supposed to be sweet, hopeful, a mother's small, aching wish. But something dark rippled under the tablecloth, an invisible shudder I felt in my chest. Imani didn't blink, didn't move, didn't lift her face. Her fork clattered against her plate, loud enough to echo. Silence swallowed the room, a tense, pressed silence that told me I had touched the truth she'd been hiding. "Baby," I whispered, leaning forward, "you didn't tell me anything was wrong." That was when he moved. Jared straightened, wiped his mouth slowly, set his napkin down with practiced ease. His expression softened, not with kindness, but pity, the kind of pity people offer right before they hurt you. Then he cleared his throat. The sound cut the air like a knife. Every head turned his direction, and with one breath, one shift of his jaw, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "Maybe it's time you finally knew." Jared's voice settled over the table like a storm rolling in slow. "Maybe I should explain something," he said. The laughter that had been bubbling a second ago vanished, leaving only the faint sound of silverware shifting against plates. Imani's hand fell to her lap, her eyes wide and glassy, but she still wouldn't look at me. That silence, her silence, wasn't shock anymore. It was guilt, thick enough to taste. I sat back, my pulse steady but my skin cold. "Explain what?" My tone was even. "Careful, the way you talk to a child, holding something fragile." Jared leaned forward, elbows on the table like he was bracing himself. "We didn't mean to bring it up this way," he said, glancing toward her. "But I guess you deserve to know." Every word he spoke seemed to drag Imani lower into her chair. Her fingers toyed with the napkin in her lap, twisting it so tight the linen started to tear. I studied her face the way only a mother can, the tiny movements you notice when you've memorized someone since birth, the small pulse in her neck jumping, the wetness at the corner of her lashes, the way her jaw clenched each time he inhaled. "Know what, Jared?" I said softly. He hesitated, looked at me, then at her again, as if asking permission that never came. "Imani and we've been married 9 months now." The words fell like a dropped dish. No crash, just a silence sharp enough to cut through the air. Someone gasped quietly. I didn't. I couldn't. For a second, I thought maybe I'd misheard him, that the wine had bent the room and blurred his voice. But then I saw it, the way she finally lifted her eyes, not in pride, not in defiance, but in apology. 9 months. My mind started counting backward on its own, tracing holidays, birthdays, phone calls she skipped, visits she postponed. I saw them all folding together, like pages in a book I hadn't been allowed to read. "You what?" My voice wasn't loud, but it cracked down the middle. Imani blinked, tears pressing against her lashes, but she still didn't speak. It was Jared who carried on, steady now, maybe too steady. "We wanted to tell you sooner," he said, but I interrupted, keeping my eyes on her. "What stopped you, baby?" Her lip trembled, and for a moment I thought she might finally speak. She didn't. Jared sighed and set his glass down, the bass clicking against the wood like a metronome. "You were invited," he said quietly. That line pulled every ounce of air out of the room. I heard a fork clatter somewhere to the right. The cousin nearest to me froze, mouth half open. My heart dropped, not fast, slow, deliberate, like something falling down a long well. Jared looked directly at me now, his tone almost kind, as if that made it better. "You were invited," he repeated, "but your daughter threw the invitation in the trash." The room tilted just slightly. The Christmas lights behind Imani flickered, red and gold blurring together until they looked like fire. No one spoke. Even the music had stopped somewhere between songs. I watched my daughter wipe a single tear before she could stop it, and in that tiny motion was every answer I didn't want. I didn't shout, didn't cry, didn't move. The only sound left was the small hum in my ears and Jared whispering something to her I couldn't make out. I reached for my glass again, my hand steady, though it shouldn't have been. "Then I suppose," I said quietly, This dinner isn't really for me after all. And in the hollow stillness that followed, Imani finally looked up, but not at me, at him, like she was waiting for permission to breathe. Jared leaned closer to her and said, just loud enough for me to hear, she was going to find out eventually. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Then the sound started, nervous, dry, misplaced laughter that didn't belong in that room. It began at the far end of the table, someone's cousin or friend letting out a sharp chuckle, maybe just to break the tension. But it spread fast, the way shame always does when people don't know where else to put it. A woman across from me covered her mouth, whispering something to the man beside her. Another shifted in his seat, eyes darting from me to Imani, then back to his plate. I could hear the scrape of a fork against porcelain, the hush of someone clearing their throat, the brittle noise of discomfort pretending to be humor. I didn't join them. I sat still, my hands folded on the tablecloth that was starting to blur beneath my vision. The red and gold patterns twisted until they looked like a warning. I watched Imani, waiting for her to do what she used to do. When she was little, look at me when she was wrong, at least acknowledge the wound she'd opened. But she didn't. Her eyes stayed fixed on the glass in front of her, watching the condensation slide down as if it held the answer to how to disappear. Jared glanced toward her once, his expression a mix of guilt and irritation, like he hadn't meant for the words to fall the way they did. But he didn't take them back. He didn't offer me so much as an apology. Instead, he straightened his tie, took a slow sip of his drink, and leaned back like a man who'd just finished a confession that relieved him of something heavy. The laughter quieted into whispers, then into the silence that follows embarrassment too large to name. Someone reached for the gravy boat. It clattered slightly against the china, and the sound made me flinch. I caught the reflection of myself in the silver rim of a platter, calm face, trembling hand. It wasn't anger sitting in my chest. It was something colder, the kind of cold that starts in your stomach and climbs until your heart can't beat right. I wanted to ask her why. Why throw it away? Why shut me out of the one thing I'd prayed for since she was old enough to understand love? But I knew that if I spoke, my voice would crack and spill more than I could gather. So I said nothing. Imani dabbed at the corner of her eye with the napkin, pretending to adjust her lipstick. Her shoulders quivered, but her mouth never opened. The tears she fought weren't for me. They were for being exposed. Someone near the end of the table whispered, "She didn't even tell her mama," and another murmured, "That's just wrong." Then a small laugh again, awkward and short-lived. Each sound cut through me like glass dragged across wood. I pushed my chair back slowly, careful not to let the legs scrape the floor. Every eye flicked toward me except hers. I stood, smoothing the front of my dress, straightening my spine until I could feel the ache between my shoulders. "I think I'll step outside for a bit," I said, my voice steady enough to fool them. No one stopped me. Jared shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Imani's fingers tightened around the edge of the tablecloth. The muscles in her neck moved like she wanted to speak, like her throat was carrying words that couldn't find air. But she stayed silent. I took my purse from the back of the chair and turned toward the door. The lights from the tree reflected off the glass cabinet, throwing colors across the floor that looked too bright for the moment I was living in. At the doorway, I hesitated, just long enough to see her finally look up. Not a word came out, not even my name. just that terrified stillness in her eyes, the kind that begged for time to rewind. I nodded once, a gesture small enough to mean everything and nothing. Then I walked out of that dining room, the laughter still echoing in my ears like it belonged to someone else's life. Behind me, the chair I'd left empty creaked, as if someone had just sat down, and Jared's voice followed, low and sharp. "You should have told her sooner, Imani." The hallway felt longer than it had when I walked in. Same runner rug, same framed family pictures on the wall that did not include me, but now every step sounded too loud in my own ears. My heels sank softly into the fibers, but inside I felt hollow, like somebody had taken a sponge and emptied me out from the center. I didn't slam doors or throw anything. I just walked, one foot in front of the other, clutching my purse strap so tight my fingers ached. The murmur of voices from the dining room faded behind me, replaced by the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of a clock in the living room. Each tick felt like it was counting down to the woman I used to be disappearing. At the entryway table, I paused. My coat was hanging on the same hook I'd used for years when I came to see my daughter. For birthdays, for Sunday dinners, for the day she first brought Jared home to meet you properly, Mama. All of that lived in the fabric under my hands as I slid one arm into the sleeve. I swallowed hard as I buttoned it, focusing on the small motions. Push through the hole. Smooth the lapel. Tug at the hem. Keep breathing. My vision blurred at the edges, but no tears fell. The numbness had beaten the crying to the door. When I reached for the handle, I heard it, the soft pad of footsteps behind me. Lighter than Jared's, faster than Imani's. I didn't turn right away. I needed that 1 second where it was just me and the door, me and the choice to leave. Quietly, "Miss Bennett," a voice said, gentle, nervous. I turned my head slightly and saw her, Imani's friend, the one with the small gold hoops and the burgundy dress. She'd been sitting 2 seats down, stealing glances between us when the room tightened. Her eyes were shiny now, not from laughter, but from something close to pity. "Yes," I asked, keeping my hand on the knob. She hesitated at the edge of the rug, like crossing onto the tile. Near me might pull her too close to the truth. She tucked a curl behind her ear, looked back toward the dining room, then at me again. She didn't mean for it to come out like that. She said, "Finally." The sentence dropped in the space between us, unfinished and thin. I let it hang there. "Which part?" I asked quietly. "The 9 months or the trash?" Her face crumpled for half a second before she caught it. "It's complicated," she whispered. "She's been scared and stubborn and listening to the wrong people." Scared. The word stung because there was a time my daughter ran to me when she was afraid. Now she'd built a life big enough to hide a whole marriage and small enough to fit my name into a trash can. "She's not a bad person." The friend rushed on, her hands fluttering a little. She thought telling you would make everything worse. And then it got bigger and bigger, and tonight it just spilled. I finished for her. She nodded, eyes glossy. "She talks about you," she added, almost like it might be a gift. "More than you think." I looked at the girl fully, then. She couldn't have been more than late 20s, same age range as my own child, carrying guilt that didn't belong to her. "What's your name again?" I asked. She blinked. "I'm sorry. You can just call me her friend. It's not my business. I didn't want you to leave thinking nobody in that room knew it was wrong. That, more than anything, almost cracked me open. Not the confession, not the excuses. That quiet admission. Somebody saw, somebody knew, and still nobody stopped it. Well, I said, turning the knob just enough to feel the cold draft kiss my ankles. Knowing and saying are two different things. She winced like the words hit exactly where they were supposed to. Her gaze dropped to the floor. For a moment, we stood there in the dim light of the hallway lamp, two women caught in the middle of a decision that wasn't ours to make, but was ours to carry. Then her phone buzzed. Once. Then again. A sharp, insistent vibration against the fabric of her dress. She pulled it out of her clutch, glanced at the screen, and all the color drained out of her face. Her eyes darted from the phone to the dining room, then to me. Her fingers shook as she locked the screen, like she'd touched something too hot. "Is everything all right?" I asked, my voice still low, still steady. She swallowed, chest rising too fast. I have to go back in," she whispered, almost breathless. Without another word, she hurried away. And as the door clicked shut behind me, I caught one last glimpse of her turning the phone face down on the table, like whatever she'd just seen wasn't meant to escape that house. The drive home felt shorter than it should have. My hand stayed at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, the way they taught us in those old classes, but I barely saw the road. Street lights slid across the windshield in long, pale strokes, turning everything outside into a blur. Inside the car, the scene at that table replayed itself with cruel clarity. Jared's calm voice, the word married, the word trash, the way laughter rose and fell like I was a punchline instead of a person. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my chest felt tight, like I had been holding my breath since I walked out of Imani's front door. The house greeted me the way it always did, porch light on, front steps familiar under my feet, a small wreath I had hung myself last week because tradition felt safer than change. I unlocked the door and stepped into the quiet. No music, no clinking dishes, no overlapping voices. Just the soft hum of my old refrigerator and the ticking clock above the mantel. I slipped my shoes off in the hallway, leaving them neatly by the mat, and shrugged out of my coat. The weight of it sliding from my shoulders felt like nothing compared to what was still sitting on my chest. In the kitchen, I set my purse on the table and rested my palms on the cool surface. For a moment, I let my head hang, not to cry. The tears were there, but something heavier climbed in front of them. Grief came first, heavy and slow, as the picture sank in. My only child stood at a table full of people who knew about her marriage, while I sat there like a guest who missed the memo. I poured myself a glass of water from the tap and watched the bubbles rise. Each one popped against the surface, a small, pointless burst, gone as quickly as it formed. That was how my dignity felt in that room. Present, fragile, then gone under the weight of other people's comfort. I walked into the living room and sat on the edge of the couch. The lamplight spread warm across the carpet, and my hands. I stared at the wrinkles in my palms, the lines that came from years of working, cooking, clapping for school programs, braiding little girl hair that belonged to the same woman who threw my invitation away. Grief shifted then. It did not leave, but it moved over just enough to make room for something sharper. Clarity stepped in, not loud, but firm. My mind stopped looping only what happened at dinner and started reaching back, pulling on small threads I had ignored. Months ago, late spring, Imani had stopped by my house with a bag of takeout and a distracted smile. She sat at this same table, picking at her food, checking her phone more than she used to. I remembered asking about Jared, saying his name the way a mother says a man's name when she is trying to understand the shape of his presence in her daughter's life. She had laughed then, too quickly, and changed the subject to work. A few minutes later, she told me their mail had been getting mixed up with the neighbors and asked me out of nowhere if I was still using the post office box I had kept for years. When I reminded her that I had closed it to save a little money after retiring, her face did something strange. A flicker, a brief, tight swallow, like a plan had just fallen through, and she needed to hide that from me. I had let it go, told myself she was tired, told myself adulthood made children secretive in harmless ways. Now, sitting on my own couch, I watched that memory play again with a different lens. The way she folded her napkin too many times. The way she rushed out after 1 hour, hugging me quickly without meeting my eyes. Something had been living under her skin, even then. I just had not been ready to see it. The clock on the wall chimed the hour, soft and distant. I realized my phone was still in my purse in the kitchen. I had not checked it since I left, since before her friend's wide eyes and shaking hands. I stood, joints protesting a little, and walked back to the table. The purse looked small against the wood. I reached in, fingers brushing old receipts, a house key, a tube of lipstick I barely used anymore, until they found the cold rectangle of my phone. As soon as I pulled it out, the screen lit up. A notification banner slid across the top before I even unlocked it. It was a message preview. The name at the top saved from some past introduction, some moment when Jared had insisted I take a number in case you ever need anything. The contact read, "From Jared's office." Below it, a single line of text glowed on the screen. Waiting, the message preview sat on my screen like it was holding its breath. "From Jared's office. Ms. Bennett, I'm sorry about tonight." I lowered myself back into the chair, thumb hovering over the phone. For a second, the old hurt rose again, being left out, being laughed at, but something else pushed up behind it now. Curiosity, not the nosy kind. The kind that comes when life stops making sense and you're tired of telling yourself, it's nothing. I opened the message. "Ms. Bennett, I'm sorry about tonight. This is the woman who sat near the end of the table. I work with Jared. I didn't know you were just finding out. I can't stop thinking about it." Her words made the hallway scene click into place. The wide eyes, the shaking hands, the phone turned face down. She hadn't just been uncomfortable. She'd been carrying something. I took a slow breath and typed back, "Thank you for checking on me. I made it home safe." I watched the dots appear, vanish, then appear again. She was fighting herself through text, same way she had in that hallway. "I know it's not my place," her next message read, "but there's been tension around them for months. What happened tonight, that was only part of it." I leaned back, feeling my spine press against the chair. The house was still quiet, but the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like a room waiting for someone to turn the light on. My mind started reaching back, little moments that hadn't fit right. The day I dropped by unannounced, and Imani met me at the door, closing it behind her like the house was unfinished or hiding. The way she kept saying, "We're still getting settled, Mama," even though months had passed. The time I called and heard a man in the background say, "Don't bring her into this," before the line went dead. I had told myself I misheard, that I'd interrupted some TV show. Now, those memories lined up like puzzle pieces I'd shoved into the wrong box. What do you mean part of it? I typed. I erased the next 3 sentences I wanted to add. This was not the time to sound broken. This was the time to listen. The reply came slower. I shouldn't be saying anything, but I was there when he first told us he got married. He said your reaction had been dramatic and that you didn't support them. He made it sound like you chose not to be there. A dull ache settled behind my ribs. So not only had I been erased from the day itself, my absence had been turned into a story I never got to defend. I stared at the screen, then let my thumbs move. I didn't know there was a wedding. I got no invite. That's the truth. This time the dots flashed and stayed. Then that changes a lot, she wrote, because he told that version to everyone at work, to his boss, to the people who signed things for him. He kept saying, her mother resents me, but once everything's in my name, she'll calm down. Everything in his name. The words sat heavy. My pulse quickened, not from pain this time, but from a cold kind of awareness. Everything meant more than rings and photographs. It meant accounts, property, decisions made on paper while I was busy buying holiday centerpieces and cooking for a daughter who could smile in my kitchen with a whole wedding ring hidden under her sleeve. I thought of the house I had helped her with, the down payment I'd pushed across my own savings account without blinking. So you'll never have to start like I did, I had said the day we signed. She had squeezed my hand then, eyes wet, calling me her blessing. Had they been shifting that blessing around behind my back? What kind of things did they sign? I asked, choosing each word carefully. The dots blinked again. I only saw bits. Forms on his desk. He asked me to print some pages because the office printer closer to you-know-who was acting up. I could almost hear her lowering her voice even in text. One of them mentioned a property transfer. I remember because your last name was on there under previous owner. My breath caught. She kept typing. I told myself it wasn't my business. People move things into their spouse's name all the time. But after watching you tonight, I don't know. It doesn't feel right. He was in a hurry to get it done before the ceremony. Kept saying, once it's official, she can't undo it. The room seemed to tilt. The clock ticked on, steady and indifferent, while inside me something shifted from hurt to alert. This was bigger than a thrown-away envelope. This was about being written out of things I had actually built. My fingers steadied over the screen. Do you still have anything you saw? This time, there was a long pause. I imagined her sitting on her bed, phone in her hand, going back and forth with herself the way she had in that hallway. Then another message appeared. I shouldn't, but I took a picture that day because the wording bothered me. I never deleted it. A new notification slid over the screen. Photo incoming. The image finished loading. And there, clear as ink, was a document on Jared's desk, my daughter's signature at the bottom, and my own last name printed neatly beside the words, to be removed. The photo opened full screen, and for a moment I forgot to breathe. It wasn't just any paper. I knew those lines, that layout. I'd sat across from enough desks, signing my name under fluorescent lights, to recognize the shape of ownership when I saw it. At the top was the address of my daughter's house. The same house I'd stood in a few hours earlier, choking on laughter that wasn't mine. Under it, in smaller print, were the words that turned my stomach, change of ownership / title update. My last name sat there in black and white, next to a box labeled current owner. Right beside it was a little phrase, the one that had chilled that girl at the office so much she took a picture, to be removed. Below, in neat, steady strokes, were two other names. Imani's, Jared's, side by side. No hyphen. No mention of me anywhere under new owner. I zoomed in until the letters blurred. Somewhere above the mantel, the clock ticked like nothing in the world had shifted. But inside me, the betrayal that had started at that dining table began to spread, moving from my chest to my bones, from personal hurt to something bigger and colder. They hadn't just hidden a ceremony. They had been moving concrete parts of my life around like furniture, quietly, efficiently, while I was busy making potato salad and sending thinking of you texts. I traced the edge of the screen with my thumb, remembering the day we first bought that house. Imani had been so excited, her voice high and shaky as she showed me the listing. "Just help me with the down payment, Mama," she begged. "I'll handle everything else. I promise." At the closing, there had been a stack of papers thick enough to build a wall. The man behind the desk explained things in a rushed tone, pointing, flipping, waiting for signatures. I remembered frowning at one page, asking, "My name is just here to help you qualify, right?" Imani had squeezed my hand under the table. "Just for now," she'd said. "Once we're steady, we'll take care of it." Take care of it. At the time, it sounded like reassurance. Tonight, looking at this photo, it read like a plan. A new message bubble appeared under the image. "I know this looks bad," the woman from his office wrote, "but when he had me print it, he said you'd already agreed. He said you wanted everything in the young people's names before the wedding, so they could start fresh." Fresh. It was almost funny, the way people put pretty words on ugly actions. I never agreed to anything like this. I typed back, each letter pressed harder than the last. Nobody told me about this transfer. Not once. I stared at the picture again. My name wasn't just being nudged aside. It was being formally, carefully erased on the same timeline as a marriage I didn't attend, didn't even know existed. My chest quit aching and started to harden. A new kind of understanding settled in. This wasn't a daughter stumbling through fear and secrets anymore. This was a structure. Meetings, signatures, conversations I wasn't invited to, even when my name was printed at the top of the page. Another message came through. There were other documents too, she wrote. Things with his family's name on them. His mother's. They wanted clean books before the ceremony. He kept saying there couldn't be any complications if anything happened later. Complications. I pictured Jared's mother, the one who'd sat at the table tonight with a tight smile and polite eyes, studying me like I was a variable she didn't fully trust. I remembered the way she'd asked months ago at a barbecue. "So, Claudia, you still have your name on the deed?" That must feel secure. The way her tone had wrapped around that last word, half compliment, half challenge. It wasn't just Imani and Jared. This had fingerprints from his side too. It made my humiliation feel less like an accident and more like the leftover piece of a larger arrangement. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. The answer came slower. "Because tonight, watching you sit there, you didn't look like a woman who chose to walk away from anything. You looked blindsided. And if that's true, then some of what's been said around that office isn't." I let the phone rest on the table, the screen still lit. The house felt different around me now. same furniture, same walls. But I was no longer just a mother whose feelings had been hurt at dinner. I was a woman whose name was being peeled off places it had earned the right to live. The grief that had wrapped itself around my ribs loosened, just enough for something sharper to slide in. Focus. I wasn't going to chase anyone for explanations, but I would not sit quietly while people rewrote the story of what belonged to me. My phone vibrated again. Not a message this time. A call. I glanced at the screen, expecting that office contact. Instead, a name I knew by heart stared back at me. Imani Mobile. It rang once. My thumb hovered over the green button. Before I could touch it, the ringing stopped, and the screen went dark, leaving my own reflection staring back at me in the black glass. I stared at the dark screen where Imani's name had just been, my own face faint in the glass. The old me would have called back immediately, fingers moving faster than my mind, desperate to patch whatever could still be saved. That instinct rose up like it always did, hot and familiar. But tonight, something in me stayed seated. I set the phone down on the table, screen facing away. The urge to reach for it pulsed in my fingers, but I pressed my hands flat against my knees instead. She had chosen silence at that table, chosen it while her husband spoke for her, while her mother sat there swallowing humiliation in front of strangers. Tonight, for the first time, I chose it back. The house felt wider with that decision. Not empty, just mine again. I stood, turned off the lamp, and let the shadows take the room one corner at a time. In the bedroom, I moved slower than usual, folding my dress over the back of the chair, smoothing lotion into my tired feet. My mind replayed every second from the night, but under the ache there was a thin new edge of control. I did not have to answer to anyone tonight. I climbed into bed and lay on my back, eyes on the ceiling fan that wasn't moving. The quiet pressed close, but it didn't crush. Somewhere between grief and anger, a line had been drawn. They could spin whatever stories they wanted about me in rooms I wasn't in. Tonight, I was finally listening to the story being told in front of my face. At some point, sleep came in pieces. When morning light slipped through the curtains, my throat felt dry, my body heavy, but my mind was clearer than it had been in months. The phone was still in the kitchen. I had left it there on purpose. I made coffee first, measured the grounds, filled the water, waited for the slow drip to fill the pot. Routine gave my hands something to do, while my thoughts lined up. When I finally picked up the phone again, I saw the missed call from Imani still sitting there alone. No message, no follow-up, just that one ring that had never turned into words. There were also new notifications, one from a store flyer, another from the church group, and one more from the contact I didn't quite know what to call, his co-worker, the woman who had decided her conscience was louder than her fear. I hope I didn't overstep last night. Her first morning message read, I barely slept. There's something else I think you should see. My stomach tightened, but my fingers stayed steady. Go ahead, I wrote. I'm listening. The reply came with a picture, this time before the words. I tapped it, letting it fill the screen. This document looked different. Less about the house, more about what would happen if life took a wrong turn. At the top, there were lines about coverage and benefits, the kind of paper people sign when they're planning for the worst without wanting to say it out loud. I saw Jared's name first, then Imani's. Below them, in print, were the words spelling out who would receive what if one of them were gone. I searched for my own name and didn't find it anywhere. Instead, tucked neatly under the part that mentioned the house and other joint assets, was another woman's name, Jared's mother. The wording was careful. If Imani could not be reached or was no longer living, everything tied to the home I had helped her start would fall into his family's hands. Not back to my estate. Not held for any future children. It slid past me completely, as if my blood had never touched those walls. My grip tightened around the phone. This wasn't just about a daughter making a selfish choice. It was a chain of decisions, each signed and stamped, pulling my life's work into arms that had watched me at that table with dry eyes. Another message followed the picture. He had me scan this the same week he mentioned you causing trouble about the house, she wrote. He laughed when he said it. I thought maybe you two had just argued. I didn't realize you hadn't even seen any of this. I thought back to a phone call months ago when Imani's voice had been thin and rushed. We're just sorting some things out, Mama, she had said. Nothing you need to worry about. Back then, I took her at her word. Today, the memory felt like a curtain being pulled. I put the phone down, this time more gently. The first layer of hurt had been personal, left out of the wedding, laughed at over the truth of an envelope. The second layer was wider. Papers, plans. His family's names, where mine should have at least been considered, if not honored. The clock on the stove blinked the time, steady and green. I opened the back door to let in some air. The chill caught my skin, waking me up even more. Silence, once something that scared me, now felt like a coat I was finally learning how to wear. I didn't call Imani. I didn't call Jared. I let the quiet answer for me. Later that afternoon, as I sat at the table with a notepad I hadn't written on yet, my phone buzzed again. This time it was her. A message bubble appeared under her name. First one line, then another, then more, words building into a paragraph, then breaking, then forming again as she edited whatever she was trying to say. I watched the sentences appear piece by piece. Mama, Then I never meant for you to find out like that. Then something longer I couldn't fully read before it shifted. Then, just as the lines seemed to settle into something whole, they vanished. In their place, the screen showed only her name and the small note beneath it. Imani is typing. Nothing else came through. Lies don't stand up by themselves. They need helpers, papers, signatures, soft words that sound like love when they're really just cover. Sitting at my kitchen table with the morning light stretching across the wood, I realized my daughter hadn't only kept a secret. She'd built something on top of it. I picked up the phone and, for once, didn't open our thread first. I scrolled instead to the number for the loan office we'd used when she bought the house. It was still saved from those days when she called me 3 times a week to ask what she should say. Back then, she wanted me in every sentence. A woman answered, voice bright and practiced. I gave my name, the address, the year we'd signed. I kept my tone calm, like this was routine. I just want to confirm something about how. The property is listed now, I said. I'm not asking for anyone else's business, just whether my name is still anywhere on file. There was the familiar clacking of keys on her end, the pause of a screen loading. All right, Ms. Bennett, one moment. I waited, eyes on the window where bare branches scratched softly against the glass. When she came back, Her voice had that careful edge people use when they know they're about to disappoint you. "It looks like there was an update processed earlier this year," she said. "The current owners of record are listed as Imani Rhodes and Jared Rhodes. I don't see your name as an owner anymore, just in the historical section." Historical. A piece of me had been moved into a museum without my consent. "Do you show when that change was made?" I asked. She hesitated. "I can see the month. It was processed in March." March. 9 months. Right there in the same stretch of time my daughter was standing in some office or ceremony saying, "I do," without me, paperwork was moving my name out of her life in a different way. "Thank you," I said. My voice didn't waver. "You've been very helpful." When I hung up, I didn't cry. I let the information sit on the table with my coffee ring and the folded napkin. I wasn't just a mother left out. I was a variable removed from their plans. The phone buzzed again. "I hope I didn't make things worse," the co-worker wrote. Okay." I thought about answering with the truth. I settled on something I could manage. "I'm awake now," I typed. "Tell me what you meant about tension before the wedding." She responded quicker this time, as if she'd been hoping I would ask. "I was there late one night. When they came by the office," she wrote, "he needed to sign some final pages." She looked shaken, kept saying it was all happening too fast. Another message followed before I could reply. I overheard them in the hallway. She told him, "My mother is going to think I chose you over her." He said, "You're choosing our future. She'll adjust. My family needs to see you're all in." I read those lines twice. Shame, fear, pressure. They were all right there between the words. Imani hadn't grown up cruel. She'd grown up terrified of disappointing people. Somewhere between my expectations and his family's demands, she tried to stand in the middle and ended up digging herself into a hole so deep she couldn't call out without admitting what she'd done. Another text came. She asked him if they could wait to deal with the house until after telling you. He said it would be messy if you got involved first. His mother was on speaker once, and I heard her say, "You're a wife now, not a little girl hiding behind your mama's name." I could almost hear that woman's voice, smooth and firm, turning my love into something childish in my daughter's ears. I set the phone down and let the memories come. Imani at 16, cheeks wet, telling me, "You make me feel like I can't make a move without you." I'd thought I was protecting her. Maybe sometimes I had been smothering her without meaning to, but nothing I'd ever done lined up with having my name quietly cut out of the foundation I'd laid for her. I wasn't excusing any of it. I was just seeing the full picture now. A house held up by fear and greed, and a young woman trying to keep everyone happy until she lost sight of who she was stepping on to do it. The phone vibrated again, this time with a different tone. Not a text, a call. An unfamiliar number flashed across the screen, local area code, but not one I recognized. For a second, I considered letting it ring. Then something in my gut nudged me. I answered, "Hello, Miss Bennett." A woman's voice, breathless, rushed. Not the co-worker, not anyone from my circle. "Please tell me this is Claudia Bennett." "It is," I said slowly. "Who's speaking?" There was a pause, the kind that comes when somebody realizes they're about to cross a line they can't step back over. "My name doesn't matter right now," she said. "I'm calling because this involves your daughter and Jared, and you need to hear it before it gets to you some other way." "My name doesn't matter right now," the woman repeated, breath shaky. I'm calling because I live on their street. I'm 3 houses down from your daughter. We've spoken once. You might not remember. I close my eyes for a second, picturing the subdivision, the neat lawns, the matching mailboxes. I faintly recalled a woman waving from a driveway while I carried a casserole dish from my trunk. Polite smile, short conversation, nothing that stuck. How did you get my number? I asked, keeping my tone calm. When they moved in, she said, the HOA form had an emergency contact. Your name and number were on it. I took a picture of it at the time because I thought, oh, good. At least someone close is in the loop if anything happens. She let out a humorless little breath. Now, I'm not so sure anyone has been. My hand tightened around the phone. What's going on over there? She hesitated. I could hear a TV faintly in the background on her side, then the click as she muted it. This isn't the first time they've been loud, she said. I'm not the nosy type, but the walls out here are thin. I didn't push. People talk more when you don't force them. Tonight, after you left, she went on, voices were raised. I heard Jared first. He kept saying, you embarrass me in front of everyone, and this is exactly why I didn't want her there. It sounded bad. A familiar ache pressed at my ribs, but I let the words sit. And my daughter? I asked. She was crying. The woman said quietly, not loud, that muffled crying you do when you're trying not to make it worse. I heard her say, I didn't plan for it to come out like that, and I was going to fix it after we got through this. Then he said something about you stirring things up now that you smelled blood in the water. My jaw clenched. So in his mind, my existence was a threat, not a mother with questions. The woman took a breath. Look, Miss Bennett, I'm not calling to start drama. I've watched that girl leave that house 3 times this week and sit in her car for an hour before. Going back in. No coat, no phone in her hand. Just staring at the wheel. That's not newlywed happy. Guilt, fear, pride, they all hovered between us. I knew what it meant to stay in a situation longer than you should because you didn't want to hear, I told you so, even from the people who loved you. Has this been going on long? I asked. Since before Christmas, she said. Before that, they were loud in a different way. Laughing, music, friends over. Then it switched. Less lights on. More nights where he came home late. One time, I was bringing in groceries, and I heard him on the phone in his driveway. He said, if this deal doesn't go through, I'm screwed. The house is already tied up. We can't back out now. The house. That same house my savings had helped her step into. Now, a bargaining chip in a game I hadn't been invited to watch. Did you hear anything about what kind of deal? I asked. Not clearly, she admitted, but another neighbor works in finance. He mentioned casually that Jared had been bragging about leveraging everything to get in on some investment with his family. Said once it paid out, they'd be set for life. She paused. The way he said it, it sounded like it wasn't exactly low risk. I could see it now, Jared in his pressed shirts and polite smile, his mother's voice in his ear, telling him real men take big swings. I could see my daughter caught between wanting to believe in her husband and being ashamed to tell me she'd signed onto something she barely understood. Imani told me once she felt like everyone was waiting for her to mess up. I said more to myself than to the caller. I thought she meant co-workers. Maybe she meant me. Maybe she meant his family. The woman on the line softened her voice. I've seen the way she looks when you pull up. It's not hate. It's shame. Like she's wearing something she can't take off in front of you. The words landed heavy, but not cruel. Human. I pictured my daughter at that table, fingers shaking, eyes fixed anywhere but on me. I'd raised her to be strong, but I also raised her to care too much what people thought. Somewhere between my standards and his promises, she'd chosen a lie that looked easier to hold than the truth. Why call me now? I asked, because tonight felt like a line got crossed. She said, there's embarrassment, and then there's whatever that was, and because if they're making big money moves with your name once being attached to that property, you deserve to know before something ugly shows up at your door. I let out a slow breath. This wasn't about me barging into their life. It was about recognizing the structure built on my back and deciding whether I was going to stand still under it. Thank you, I told her, for not looking away. As if on cue, a muffled sound came through her receiver. Raised voices. Not clear enough for words, but sharp enough for tone. Hold on, she whispered. I heard her footsteps move. A door creak, then the distant echo of sound from outside. They're at it again, she murmured. He's shouting about you running to your mama, and something about papers not being reversible. She keeps saying, we can fix it, and he's saying, not if she gets involved. The argument swelled, a jumble of sounds I couldn't fully make out, but felt in my chest anyway. A thud, a chair scraping, her quick inhale. Miss Bennett, she said, voice suddenly tight, I think something's really wrong over there. Miss Bennett, I think something's really wrong over there. The neighbor had said. Her words stayed with me long after we hung up. I stood at my kitchen window, the phone still warm in my hand, staring at nothing. I couldn't hear their shouting from my house, but in my mind I could see it, his jaw tight, her shoulders hunched, both of them standing in a home half built on my sacrifice and half on his promises. The old version of me would have grabbed my keys, driven over, knocked until somebody opened that door. But I had learned something in the last 24 hours. You can't drag grown people out of a burning house they keep painting pretty from the inside. So I put the phone down. I made myself a sandwich I barely tasted. I washed the plate, dried it, put it back in the cabinet. Simple motions anchoring me, while chaos rolled somewhere I couldn't see. By evening, my body felt heavy. I went to bed with my phone on the nightstand, screen facing down, ringtone on low. I wasn't pretending nothing was happening. I was just done volunteering myself as the first responder to fires I didn't start. Sometime in the night, I woke to a faint buzz. Not loud, just enough to pull me briefly toward consciousness. I glanced at the dim screen, saw an unknown number flash, then fade. No voicemail, no text. I let it go. Sleep pulled me back under. In the morning, the light felt harsher. I reached for my phone before I reached for my slippers. 4 missed calls, all from numbers I didn't recognize. 1 local business line. 1 cell. No messages left, just the empty record of trying. A few minutes later, as coffee dripped into the pot, a voicemail alert popped up. I pressed play, holding the phone between my ear and shoulder while I opened the blinds. Good morning, Miss Bennett, a man's voice said. Professional, controlled. My name is Howard. I'm with the firm that handled the title update on your daughter's property. I was hoping to speak with you about some questions that have come up regarding your prior ownership and consent on certain documents. If you could give me a call back, I'd really appreciate it. Questions. Consent. Those were quiet words, but they didn't live in quiet worlds. I set the phone on the table and sat down. The co-worker had said she took that picture because the wording bothered her. If she'd talked to someone, shown it, told them my reaction from last night, it wasn't hard to connect the dots. Somewhere in an office, a file with my name in the historical section was now sitting on a desk that didn't expect me to say, I never agreed to this. My absence at that dinner had been an embarrassment for them. My silence now was something else, an unanswered variable in whatever plans they'd already signed. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Imani. Mama, can you please call me? It's important. No explanation. No apology. Just the weight of important hanging there. I didn't answer. Not out of spite, but out of something slower and more deliberate. I was tired of only being called when the cleanup was too big for their hands. I got up, poured my coffee, and took it to the small table by the window. The neighbor's words circled back. She keeps saying, we can fix it, we can fix it. And he's saying, not if she gets involved. Maybe my involvement was exactly what they were afraid of. Not because I'd ruined something, but because I might tell the truth on paper in a way they couldn't control. Another message came through. They're asking questions about the house, about your name. They said some things don't match. Please, Mama, I need to talk to you. I could feel her panic in the short sentences. The woman who had laughed with her friends at that table was slipping. The mask of everything is fine had cracks now, and through them I could see the girl who used to call me from college crying because she'd overdrawn her account by $20. I typed, then erased, typed again. In the end, I didn't send anything. Not yet. Instead, I took out the old manila folder I kept in the hall closet, copies of the original closing paperwork, utility setups, all the little scraps of proof that I had been there from the beginning. My handwriting on sticky notes. My initials beside signature lines. I spread them across the table like a timeline. Whatever Jared had told his family, whatever his office had believed, the truth was inked on these pages. By noon, the voicemail count had grown. Another from the same firm, this one sounding more urgent. We really do need to clarify a few points, ma'am. It's time sensitive. Time sensitive. That meant something on their end was stuck. Maybe a deal frozen. Maybe an audit triggered. Maybe a mother-in-law who didn't like the word discrepancy when it showed up near her investment. My phone vibrated again and slid slightly on the table from the force of it. I glanced at the screen. Imani, calling. I watched it ring until it stopped. A minute later, it lit up again. Another call, then another, each one pressing against my resolve. Each one proof that whatever they'd thought they could handle between themselves had reached a wall. By evening, I set the phone to silent and left it face down. I cooked a small dinner. I washed the dishes. I folded laundry I'd been ignoring. When I finally picked the phone back up, the screen brightened with a list that told its own story. 16 missed calls, all from my daughter. Day 3 started with the kind of silence that hums. Not empty, charged. I woke before the alarm. The sky outside still gray. My body already tense like it knew more weight was coming. The first thing I saw was the phone on my nightstand, its black screen reflecting my face in a faint outline. I didn't reach for it. Not yet. I got up instead, put on my robe, set the kettle on. let water heat while my mind moved slower, more careful than it used to. The first day after that dinner had been shock. The second day had been questions. This day felt like watching a storm finally touch ground. When I did pick up the phone, a cluster of new icons waited. Missed calls, voicemails, texts. I scrolled through without opening any, just skimming the names. The firm again. The unknown number I now understood as the neighbor. And scattered between them, my daughter, Imani, over and over. A fresh text sat at the bottom. Mama, they froze it. They said there's an issue with the transfer. Please pick up. Please. I sat down at the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under my weight. Froze it. That meant whatever Jared thought he could slide through with signatures and half-truths had hit a wall. My lack of signature had more power than all the smooth talk he carried into those offices. Another message came in while I watched the first. They're saying they need to verify original intent. They brought up your name. I didn't know they could do that this far in. I'm so sorry. I didn't understand everything he was doing. I just signed where they told me. There it was, her voice breaking through the script she'd been reciting for months. Not the polished daughter who smiled at his side, but the girl who used to call me from school bathrooms when life cornered her. I didn't reply. I let the words sit, allowed their weight to land. My absence had become a question mark on someone's paperwork, and that question mark was strong enough to stop whatever deal he'd built on the bones of my trust. Later that morning, the firm called again. I let it go to voicemail, then listened with the phone on speaker while I washed a mug. Ms. Bennett, this is Howard following up. We've temporarily halted processing on certain attached agreements pending confirmation from you. Your prior role as co-owner appears relevant. We would really appreciate a call so we can document your understanding of the original arrangement. There was a tightness under his politeness now, pressure from somewhere higher up, no doubt. Someone's money had been paused, and my name sat on the pause button. Around noon, Imani broke the pattern. She didn't just call, she left a message. Her voice came through the speaker, thin and fast. Mama, it's me. I know you're hurt. I know what he said at the table was ugly, and I didn't stop it, and I should have. They're asking about you now, about the house, about how it started. They're saying if you say you never agreed, it could be bad. For us. For him. She inhaled shakily. I could hear dishes clinking softly in the background, the sound of a woman trying to straighten a home that wouldn't stand still. I didn't throw that invitation away because I didn't love you, she said. I did it because I was ashamed. I thought you'd look at everything he'd talked me into and see me as foolish. He kept saying once everything went through, once the deal hit, you'd be proud. Now they're talking about fraud and misrepresentation, and I'm scared in a way I have never been scared. The word fraud landed hard, even muffled. She swallowed audibly. I need you, she whispered at the end. Not to fix it for me, just to hear me. Please call back. The message ended. The room felt heavy, but my head was clear. Shame, fear, pressure. Those had been simmering under her choices the whole time. Now, with papers under scrutiny and his big plans tied in knots, the story she'd been clinging to could no longer hold. I folded a dish towel with slow, deliberate care. Her need did not erase the hurt. Her panic did not rewrite the fact that she had stood in front of me, wedding band hidden, while strangers laughed over a lie. But for the first time, I could feel her standing in the full shadow of what she'd chosen, no more hiding behind his confidence or his mother's voice. By early evening, the calls multiplied. Each ring felt like a knock on a door inside me. I wasn't ready to open. I turned the volume down and caught the pattern instead. They came in clusters, then slowed, then came again, panic in digital form. I cooked myself a small pot of soup, the way I did when I was raising her and money was thin, but love was thick. I ate it alone at the table that had once held her homework and birthday cakes. After dinner, I walked through the house, touching frames, straightening books, reminding myself that in this space, nobody could sign me off anything. When I finally picked the phone back up that night, the list on the screen told a story all its own. 16 calls had turned into something else entirely. The counter now read, 47 missed calls. By the morning of the fourth day, the air in my house felt different. The silence that had started as a shield was now something else, a line that divided what I would tolerate from what I would not. I moved slower, but my mind was no longer foggy. I had my folder of papers stacked neatly on the table, my mug, my breath. That was all I needed for the moment. The first sign that something had shifted on their end came just after 9. A text from the same firm, but not from Howard this time. Ms. Bennett, this is Karen from compliance. We urgently require your confirmation regarding your understanding of the previous title arrangement. There are discrepancies that could affect enforceability and potential liability. Please contact us as soon as possible. Urgently. Enforceability. Liability. Those weren't words people used when things could be smoothed over with a friendly call. A minute later, a voicemail icon appeared. I let it sit until the kettle whistled, then pressed play with one hand while pouring hot water over my tea bag with the other. Miss Bennett, Karen's voice said, tight and clipped, we've had to suspend disbursement related to a secondary agreement tied to the property. There are signatures recorded that conflict with your documented role as an original co-owner. If you did not consent, certain actions may not only be void, but may trigger formal review. We need to hear from you directly. Suspend. Review. My absence had become more than an inconvenience. It was a block in a pipe they had thought would flow freely. Not long after, the neighbor called. I answered this time, holding the phone between my ear and shoulder as I stirred sugar into my tea. Miss Bennett, she said, skipping any greeting, they've had 2 visitors already. One looked like someone from a bank or office, suited, papers in hand. The other came later. No clipboard, just a look on his face like he was delivering bad news. My spoon clinked against the mug. What kind of bad news? I was pulling trash cans back from the curb, she said. I saw the man hand Jared an envelope, thick one. Jared opened it right there in the doorway, and his whole body changed. Shoulders dropped, face went red. He crumpled it in his hand like that would erase whatever it said. I pictured it clearly, his polished control cracking at the edges. And your daughter? I asked. She was behind him. The neighbor said, no makeup, hair pulled back any kind of way. When he read whatever was in that envelope, he turned on her. Not loud enough for me to catch every word, but the tone, she let the sentence trail. Her knees went weak. She had to put a hand on the wall. I thanked her and ended the call. My tea had gone cool. The next message came from Imani. This time, not a single line. A block of text, longer than anything she'd sent in months. Mama, they shut it down. The investment he tied the house to, they froze everything when the firm flagged the transfer. His family is saying they didn't know you hadn't agreed. They're saying they won't cover what he already moved because protocol wasn't followed. They told him he's on his own. They're talking about investigations and possible charges if someone says they were misled. They keep using your name. They keep saying her mother. My eyes moved over each sentence slowly. Whatever bright future he'd been selling her on had snapped under the weight of paperwork and questions. The people who had pushed him to leverage everything were now backing away, hands raised. Another message followed quickly, words tripping over each other. They said the only way to even try to salvage any of this is if you confirm that you understood what was happening and that you wanted your name off. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't lie with them looking me in the face like that. I told them, you thought you were just helping me by, not handing everything over forever. The room went quiet. I set the phone down, palm flat against the table. There it was. The moment the story she had been holding finally cracked. In some office, surrounded by people in suits and careful words, my daughter had said out loud what she had done. A third message arrived, shorter. He's furious. He says I turned on him. He says this is exactly why he didn't want you involved. His mother hasn't called me back. I think they're leaving him to clean it up alone. The image of her standing between those two worlds, mine and his, tightened my chest. Part of me wanted to rush in and pull her out. Another part remembered the sound of that dining room laughter, her eyes fixed on her plate while they treated my absence like a joke. Both truths sat side by side. The day moved in small, careful pieces. I washed my hair. I changed the sheets. I took the folder from the table and placed it in a tote bag, not as a threat, but as an acknowledgement. I had proof. I had options. I had time. By late afternoon, the call started again. First the firm, then an unknown number I suspected was someone on his side. Then Imani. Her voicemails grew more frantic. Mama, please. They're saying if you tell them you didn't know, this could turn criminal. He could lose his job. We could lose the house. I know I did wrong. I know I hurt you. I can't sleep. I can't breathe. I keep seeing your face at that table. In another one, her voice was hoarse. I told him I should have told you everything from the start. He said if you had just kept quiet and played along, none of this would be happening. He doesn't understand that I can't ask you to lie. For us. Not after what we did. I did. I'm the one who threw it away, Mama. Not just the invitation. All of it. The days of her silence were catching up to her in one long confession. Night settled outside, the sky darkening while my living room lamp cast a soft circle around me. I sat in my chair and let the phone buzz on the table face down until the vibrations blurred into one long hum in my bones. At some point, the noise stopped. The house returned to its quiet hum. I made myself a cup of chamomile and stood at the window, watching cars pass by in streaks of light, each one going somewhere that wasn't my burden. When I finally picked the phone up, my thumb hesitated before waking the screen. The light was bright after so much dimness. Numbers lined the call log in neat rows. The counter at the top had changed again, telling its own story without a single word spoken. There, in small, unforgiving numbers, it read 102 missed calls. I sat there staring at that number for a long time. 102 missed calls. Each one a moment. I had chosen myself over the habit of rushing to save other people. My chest was tight, but my hands were steady. The phone vibrated in my palm again, buzzing with the same name that had been lighting it up for days. Imani. This time, I didn't let it ring out. I slid my thumb across the screen and lifted it to my ear. "Hello," I said. My voice sounded like someone I trusted, calm, not cold. There was a pause on the other end, the kind where you can hear the shape of a person's mouth, even if you can't see it. Then a small, broken version of my daughter's voice came through. "Mama, I'm here," I answered. A sound left her throat that wasn't quite a sob. Not yet. More like a dam straining. "I thought you were never going to pick up," she whispered. "You were wrong," I said. "Not about everything, but about that." She inhaled sharply. I heard background noise. The faint hum of a refrigerator. A distant car on her street. The quiet of a house that had run out of words to shout. "I don't know where to start," she said. "Try the beginning," I told her. "Not the version you told them. The one you were hiding from me." There was a rustle, like she sat down hard. For a moment, all I heard was her breathing. "When he proposed," she began slowly, "I felt lucky, like I'd finally done something right. His family kept talking about how I was marrying up, how I'd never have to worry the way you did." Her voice shook. "I didn't want to be the girl from your little house anymore. I wanted to walk into places and have people look at me like I belonged there." My fingers tightened around the phone, but I stayed quiet. "He said we'd fix everything," she continued. "The debt, the house, our image. He said we needed a clean slate before his parents would really accept us. That meant the papers, the accounts, the wedding." "The wedding I wasn't at," I said, not as a question, just so she knew I was with her in the story. Her breath hitched. "He didn't want you there. Mama." "Not really. He said you'd come in with your questions and your opinions and make him look small in front of his people. He said you'd bring up how you helped with the house, and they'd think he was using me. He kept asking, 'Do you want them to respect us?' Or, 'Do you want your mama measuring the curtains?'" A tear slid warm down my cheek, but my voice stayed even. "So you threw it away?" "Yes," she choked. "I did. I stood over the trash can, and I did it with my own hands. I told myself you'd be hurt for a while, but once everything was set and we were shining, I'd throw you a big party and pretend that was what you always wanted. I thought I could make it up to you with the picture of success." I could hear her moving, pacing now, the crack of a floorboard, the hitch in her breath as she turned. "When he started tying the house into that deal, I was scared," she said. "I asked questions, but not the right ones. I let them rush me. Every time I hesitated, his mother would say, 'You trust your husband, don't you?' And I kept thinking about how you always warned me not to let a man carry everything in his name. I didn't want you to look at me like I was stupid. So I didn't tell you. I signed and pretended I was confident." Guilt rolled through her words now, thick and raw. "He told his co-workers you refused to come to the wedding." She admitted. "He told his family you were dramatic, controlling, that you always wanted everything your way. And I let him. I stood there and let people think you abandoned me because it was easier than saying I had been a coward." There it was. Not just what she'd done, but who she'd had to become to live with it. When they froze the accounts, she whispered. He looked at me like I'd betrayed him by telling the truth. He asked me if I was happy now that everything was crashing. His family stopped answering his calls. And all I could think was, this started the day I decided your love was something I could throw away and come back to later. I let that sit between us. The girl I raised was finally standing in front of her own reflection, no one else talking for her. I am so ashamed, she said, the words cracking open. Ashamed of what I did with that invitation. Ashamed of how I let them paint you. Ashamed of how I chose silence when you were sitting at my table looking at me like you didn't know your own child. Her voice dropped to a whisper. If you never forgive me, I will understand. But they told me today that without you, we could lose everything. The house, his job, maybe more. I don't know what they'll decide. I need you to know I did this. Not you, not them, me. Underneath all of it, his schemes, his mother's pressure, the firm's careful words, there it was, my daughter stripped down to the truth. I took a breath, feeling the weight and the space it opened up. Imani, I said quietly, you've told me a lot of what you were afraid of losing. Yes, she whispered. But I need to know something else. I continued, my voice steady, each word deliberate. Are you asking me to save your marriage, or are you asking me to save you? On the other end of the line, there was a silence, so raw, I could almost feel her chewing on it. When I asked if she wanted me to save her marriage, or save her, the words didn't land soft. They landed where they were supposed to. I don't know, she finally whispered. All I know is I can't carry this by myself anymore. I'm tired of pretending. Mama, I'm tired of lying for him. I don't want to lose everything. You already lost something, I said gently. You lost me. Now we're talking about if you want that back. She cried then, not the muffled sniffles I'd heard through walls and whispered calls, but the sound of a woman whose mask had slipped and shattered. I let her. I didn't rush in with promises. When the sobs quieted, I spoke. Here's what I'm willing to do. I said, I will tell the truth. To the firm. To whoever asks. I will not lie for you. I will not say I consented to something I didn't. If that truth helps you keep a roof over your head, good. But I will not bend it to keep him comfortable. She sniffed hard. So you're not going to protect him. I never promised to. I replied, I'm your mother, not his shield. The next day, I walked into the firm with my tote bag and my good coat. The lobby smelled like toner and nervousness. A young receptionist led me to a glass-walled conference room where Howard and Karen sat with folders arranged in neat stacks. Their faces carried that mix of apology and self-protection people, where when they realize a mess has spilled into the open, they ask their questions. I answered plainly, yes, I had helped my daughter buy the house. No, I had not agreed to remove my name under the circumstances described. No one had explained that my stake would be used as collateral for any side investment. No, I had not been told there was a timeline tied to a wedding I did not attend. I slid my copies of the original documents across the table. My initials stared back at us from years ago, solid and small. I trusted my child. I said quietly, I did not give anyone permission to turn that trust into a bargaining chip. They took notes. They nodded. They used careful phrases about corrective actions and internal review. I didn't ask what would happen to him. That wasn't my work. My work was done the moment I refused to carry the lie. When I stepped back outside, the air felt cooler, cleaner. The sun was low, but it was still mine. That evening, Imani came to my house. She didn't just appear. She texted first. "Can I come by?" No one else. Just me. I said yes. When I opened the door, she looked smaller than the woman who'd sat at that Christmas table. No lashes, no careful outfit. Just my child, eyes red, shoulders bare of performance. She stepped inside, like she wasn't sure she was welcome. I let her stand there in the hallway she grew up in, surrounded by pictures she tried to outrun. "They said it's going to be bad for him," she murmured. "At work. Maybe beyond that. The deal is gone. His family is distant." She swallowed. "They also said, because of what you told them, they can unwind some things. My name doesn't have to be tied to all of it the way he wanted. The house, there are options. If certain people agree." "Certain people," I repeated, "meaning me?" She nodded, tears spilling again. "I know I don't deserve you signing anything. I know I don't deserve you lifting one more finger after what I did. But if you choose to, they said the title can be corrected. Put back how it was. Or sold with protections. They said you'll have the say this time." I studied her, really looked at her. My daughter, not his wife, not their project. The girl I'd raised, standing in the middle of the consequences she'd helped create. "Here's what I've decided." I said, "I'm not going to let you be buried under something you were bullied into and too scared to name. I'll work with them to make sure that house doesn't drown you. But I will not sign it back into his hands. If I help untangle this, it will be to give you the chance to stand on your own feet, not to go running back into quicksand." She covered her mouth, shoulders shaking. "So you're not done with me?" "I'm done. With the version of you that thinks you have to lie to be loved," I said. "The rest of you? The honest one who finally called me as her mother, not her PR team? I can work with her, but there will be boundaries." We sat at my small table later, 2 mugs between us. No feast, no crowd, just us. She apologized, not in a long speech, but in short, honest pieces. For the envelope, for the laughter she didn't stop, for letting my name be dragged in rooms I never walked into. I didn't rush to say, "It's okay." It wasn't. But I did say, "We can start again. Slowly. You'll show me with your choices, not your words." When she got up to leave, she turned back at the doorway. "Will you ever toast for me again?" she asked softly. I looked at her, the woman and the girl layered together. "One day," I replied, "when you've built a life you're not ashamed to invite me into, I'll raise my glass, not to your wedding, not to a house, but to the day you chose truth over performance." After she left, the house was quiet again, but it didn't feel lonely. I poured myself a small splash of ginger ale into a glass and stood in my living room, the same room where I used to picture her in a white dress walking toward a future I understood. I lifted the glass, just for me. "This," I murmured, "is the toast I should have made. Not our next toast will be at your wedding, but our next toast will be at the moment my daughter finally remembers who she is." Then I took a slow sip and let the peace settle in my chest like something I had earned.